When you speak to Christians about keeping the Sabbath, they say, we celebrate the Lord's Day in honour of the resurrection, not the Sabbath. And they'll go to verses like Matthew 28:1 and Acts 20:7 and say, see, we gave it on the first day of the week, which is Sunday. Well, let's test that. So, in the end of a Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, which people just assume means Sunday, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. So, is the first day of the week Sunday, as we know it today, or does it mean something else? Turns out the word week is from the Greek sabbaton, which means the interval between the two Sabbaths, or day one of a 7-day Shabbatical cycle, which turns out to be on the Feast of First Fruits, fulfilling the law perfectly. And as you can see, he was crucified on Passover, was in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights, fulfilling the sign of Jonah. Then he rose on the first day of the week, the Feast of First Fruits, which is to be kept the first day of the week, which is the day after the Sabbath, and it shall be a statute forever, not till the cross, forever. So if you truly want to honour the resurrection of our Messiah, do it on the day that honours him, not Ishtar. So Ishtar Sunday, which is to be celebrated on the Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, with sacred hot cross buns, ham, rabbits and eggs painted with the blood of infants. Sound familiar? But what about Apostle Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles? Did he celebrate Easter, or did he keep the feast days? Because as Paul said, imitate me as I imitate Messiah. Because Paul was most definitely keeping the feast days, as you can see. In Acts 2, Paul and the others were gathered together to celebrate the feast of Shavuot. They were definitely keeping Passover and unleavened bread. In fact, Paul instructs us to keep the feast, clearly referring to unleavened bread, which they continue to do, as you can see here in Acts 12. In Acts 18, Paul was leaving for Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. In Acts 27, Paul referred to the fast being over, and there was a clear reference to the Day of Atonement. But what does history tell us? Was Paul keeping Passover or Easter? Well, this is Eusebius, a prominent historian who recorded the events up to 339 AD. So this is the Quaternion-Deciman controversy, and it sheds light on the power struggle between Rome and the church set up by Paul himself. For the parishes of Asia, as from elder tradition, held to the 14th day of the moon, the Saviour's Passover, but this was not the custom of the churches of Rome. So they drew up a decree demanding that they kept Easter instead of Passover. And here's their response. The bishops of Asia, or Paul's churches, refused, deciding to keep Passover, and quote, "We observe the exact day, neither adding to nor taking away. For in Asia many great lights have fallen asleep, or died, or martyred. These include Philip, one of the 12, and his 2 daughters, John, Polycarp, Traces, Sagaris, Papyrus, Melito, all martyrs. All these obeyed Passover according to the gospel, deviating in no respect but following the rule of faith." And Polycrite says, "All his relatives were bishops, and I am the 8th. And my relatives always observed the day when the people put away the leaven, the feast of unleavened bread." Polycrite wasn't intimidated, and he wrote back saying, "We ought to obey God rather than man." Now that's pretty good advice. And in response, Victor from the Church of Rome said, "Cut off all the parishes of Asia, Paul's churches, call them heretics, and declare them wholly excommunicated." Wow. Because they refused to give up the holy feast days, which honour Yahushua, for Easter. So, the book of Acts and history itself clearly show that the early church fathers, the churches Paul established himself, were clearly keeping the feast days right up until around 300 years after Christ's death. And they were being persecuted and even martyred because they refused to give up the feast days. And just a side note, did you know there is actually a day called the Lord's Day? And that happens to be the Sabbath. Isaiah 58:13. If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, whose? The Lord's holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honourable, you shall honour him. So clearly, it is the Sabbath that honours the Lord, not Sunday, and it is the high Sabbaths, or the Feast of First Fruits, that honours the resurrection of our Messiah, not Easter. Shalom.